The Seahawks have been playing proverbial musical chairs at center for pretty much a decade. Is that going to continue, or is Olu Oluwatimi the man for the job heading into 2025 and beyond? We're going to be taking a deep dive here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on our latest Monday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're tuning in from down in San Jose, California, or across the country in Richmond, Virginia, we appreciate each and every one of you. We are drawing closer and closer to the NFL draft, now just really 9.5 days away from things tipping off in Green Bay. Ironically enough, we got the WNBA draft going on tonight. We are in draft season in professional sports. We are going to take a look at the center position, including where the Seahawks' confidence level's at with the players currently on their roster. And of course, we'll be diving into our latest positional group, checking out all of the centers day 1, 2, and 3 in this year's class. This episode brought your way by our friends over at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week. That'll be coming up later in the show. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Ever since Max Unger got traded to the New Orleans Saints for Jimmy Graham back in 2015, it feels like the Seahawks have been changing their starting center about as much as people change their clothes. Every year, it seems like there's a new starter at the pivot position. Last year was no different. Connor Williams comes in, starts 9 games, then decides, you know what, I've had enough. I'm going to retire. And then Olu Oluwatimi takes over and starts the rest of the season as a second-year center formerly out of Michigan. Rob, it truly has been a turnstile at that spot for the Seattle Seahawks for a long time. And yet it does sound like there may be some continuity coming, and maybe because of necessity with this draft class we'll talk about later, but no changes at center to this point. Olu Oluwatimi still would be the starter. You got Jalen Sundell, the former undrafted rookie out of North Dakota State that the team is high on. And they brought back Mike Nowitzki on a future deal. Those were the 3 centers at the end of last season. Those are the ones that are on the roster right now. And John Schneider said he doesn't really see any upgrades at the center position in this draft. At least those are the public comments that he's made. So where do you think that confidence level is at for the Seahawks when it comes to the center position and specifically Olu Oluwatimi?
Well, I think specifically with Oluwatimi, I think the fact that Seattle brought in Connor Williams a year ago, a year after selecting the former Remington Award trophy winner as the nation's best center, I think it speaks volumes, at least as far as what the Seahawks felt then about Olu Oluwatimi. And now, of course, you have an entirely different blocking scheme, and one that I have some struggles with projecting Oluwatimi to it. He is a traditional kind of power gap center. His power, his ability just to kind of drive people off the line of scrimmage, I thought made him a quality starting center candidate. I was surprised when Seattle went with the veteran Connor Williams, although I was very excited about his upside as a former Pro Bowler. At the same time, now that we have a different system in place, I really think that Jalen Sundell is every bit as much in the starting center, competition as Oluwatimi is. I view both of them as quality starting centers in the NFL. I think that both of them have certainly some work that needs to be done. Oluwatimi needs to show greater initial quickness, lateral agility, be able to find his landmarks at the second level. Jalen Sundell needs to get stronger. He is one of those centers that is a little bit taller than ideal at the center position at 6'5", and so he's going to struggle with leverage. That is something that the Oluwatimi at closer to 6'2.5" is something that he excels with. So you're talking about 2 very different players here, and the same thing with Mike Nowitzki. I mean, he's got a little bit more of that Jalen Sundell type of a body type. Taller, leaner, but also very athletic. I think the Seahawks feel relatively confident with this group just because of the fact that the offensive line coaches and run the coaching staff that the Seahawks have brought in, mostly from the New Orleans Saints, have shown their ability to be very successful in the past. So I don't think this is the biggest area of concern for the Seahawks along the offensive line. Obviously, this was a center class that the Seahawks could have tried to invest in free agency. Drew Dahlman from Atlanta, who wound up signing elsewhere, of course, was a big time talking point throughout this entire offseason. The fact that the Seahawks didn't go that direction suggests that they are either going to completely wash their hands of this class and just go with the young players they already have on the roster, or perhaps invest a selection in this class and hope that they might be the future starter, and one that might be able to play for more than a year or two, but perhaps be a 4, 5, 10-year starter at the pivot position.
I did a 3-part video series on EmeraldCitySpectrum.com last week looking at John Benton and his previous impact that he has had on guard, centers, and tackles in his first year with a variety of teams. He has bounced around, so there's plenty of work that you can look at, and generally he has been able to get improvements out of all 3 of those position groups, but center has been one that he has definitely had some success with. And what is interesting is when you go and look at the athletic testing, as you mentioned, I think that Olu Oluwatimi's strength in his game is his power. And I think in a gap scheme, that can be accentuated better. But he actually had decent change of direction testing coming out of Michigan. He's not a guy that's going to blow you away with his 40 time. He was one of the slower centers in that class. But he had a decent 10-yard split. That, to me, matters more than the 40 time with an offensive lineman. And his change of direction numbers were really solid. His 3-cone was in the upper 10 percentile. So he is a guy that can move pretty well side to side, which you would think that means he's got a chance to be able to handle the zone scheme. I think it's a little early to rush to judgment that he can't play in this scheme. I want to see what he looks like out there once they get in the practice field and what John Benton's able to get out of him. But it is worth noting with the 9 starts that he had last year, Rob, that he gave up 8 pressures and no sacks in pass protection. He had a 98.4 pass block efficiency rate, easily the highest of any of Seattle's offensive linemen. So there's a lot to build off of there. And I think that's part of the reason that John Schneider has not invested in a free agent center. And there's not a lot of grumblings out there about them going into the draft. But that's where I want to lean with this, because, every other position group that we've looked at, even running backs, we had multiple first-round selections potentially in that group. There might be one player that can play center in this draft class that's worth a first-round pick or would be in consideration there. And I've only got 2 players total. If you include the other one, Gray Zabel, I've only got 2 players in my top 100 at the center position. I know you have a 3rd player, but Gray Zabel, I think, is playing guard in the NFL. Could he play center? Absolutely. He's played all 5 spots. So he would be the best center in this class if that's where he's going to play. And he brings the versatility, the athleticism, some functional strength to the equation. Really smart guy as well. Jared Wilson from Georgia has only started 1 season in the SEC, but he had a really good year, one of the best zone blocking centers in college football, and had really good pass protection numbers as well. He also had a dynamic performance at the combine. There's a lot of upside there for Jared Wilson. To me, though, Rob, those are the 2 that in the first 100 picks, I think, are the only ones that would maybe fall there. I know you've got a 3rd player to mention, but that's the other reason why I think your confidence is going to be higher in the group you have, because this is a very underwhelming, at least in my opinion, an underwhelming center crop in this class.
Well, it is underwhelming center crop. I mean, regardless whether you have 2 players that you think might go on the first 2 days of the draft or 3 players, as I do, then yes, I 100% agree, especially if you have young talent already in the field. And the fact that Seattle thought enough of Oluwatimi to draft him in the first place, I think that he is clearly the lead horse in this race. I just want to make sure that we talk about Jalen Sandell as well as Mike Nowitzki, just because both of them have the athletic traits that John Benton has prioritized in the packet, as well as Rick Dennison, as well as Clint Kubiak. So again, I think that these are important, prospects to kind of talk about. And I say prospects because at this point, even if they are NFL veterans, of course, they are prospects when it comes to how they fit with a brand new coaching staff for the Seahawks on the offensive side of the ball. Really quickly with Gray Zabel, I talked about him. We've talked about Gray Zabel probably as much as we talked about any interior offensive lineman in the history of Locked On Seahawks. with Gray Zabel, the biggest concern I have about him and why I have some reservations about him at guard and actually kind of prefer him a little bit at center. That's where I have him ranked, is again, just the fact that he is as tall as he is, that he has the kind of relatively narrow shoulders. I think you can get away with that a little bit more at the center position because he is as intelligent as he is. He did show the ability to be able to mirror, to anchor, and to be able to get to the second level at the Senior Bowl. He didn't start any games at the center position at North Dakota State. So that's a huge area of concern. But again, 77 and 5/8 inch wingspan means he's got relatively narrow shoulders, decent arm length, and an unbelievable athlete. But at the same time, again, I've talked to several NFL teams that do view Gray Zabel as a center over a guard. I think for Seattle, maybe they view him as a guard. The fact that John Schneider said and basically, kind of publicly slammed this center class, I don't know the way that John Schneider and the Seahawks view Gray Zabel specifically, but I do view Zabel as basically a consensus, either first or early second round selection. And Schneider echoed what you were saying, Corbin, that he didn't view very many guys in this particular draft class as being worthy of a selection that high. So to me, that suggests that the Seahawks view Gray Zabel possibly as a guard candidate. Look, I think that he'd be a great fit for the Seahawks at guard. So quickly switching over to Jared Wilson. Look, I mean, you're right. He was a one-year starter at Georgia. But the two guys that were that played ahead of him over the last 3-4 years that he has been in Athens, of course, were drafted into the NFL, and Cedric Van Pran Granger, and then Trey Hill. Both of them, again, were drafted into the NFL. Jared Wilson, to me, is the most intriguing candidate for this West Coast offense. And his 40-yard dash time, and I know it's offensive line, 40-yard dash time, throw it out the window, except when you look at most of the top athletic scores when it comes to 40-yard dash times, those are often the guys that wind up being very, very good offensive linemen in the NFL. Charles Cross and Abe Lucas being two of them here specifically for the Seahawks. 4.84 seconds in the 40-yard dash. I mean, that is the fastest that we've seen in the last 20 years for an interior offensive lineman. So I think that the Seahawks are going to be very intrigued by that. The 11-inch hands. It's not just the athletic. It's not just the feet. It's the hands. Jared Wilson has 11-inch hands. Those are the biggest hands of any of the centers in this class. So again, there's some elements of him that are easy to project to success in the NFL. And finally, Joshua Gray from Oregon State. I've kind of pounded the table for this kid. He was 7 years at Oregon State. And I know that is scary for some. It's not at all for me. This is a 5-year starter. He played left tackle up until this past season, where he moved to left guard at this left guard for the Beavers, because that's where he's going to play in the NFL, is in the interior. You think about who the Beavers' right tackle was. That was Taliesin Fuaga, first-round selection by the New Orleans Saints. This kid, Joshua Gray, was the starter at the left tackle position over Fuaga. So again, that speaks to his athletic ability. He was a 56-game starter at Oregon State. So that checks the box for durability. And then goes the East West Shrine Bowl, practices primarily at the center position. And in my opinion, at least, he was the best blocker there. So again, there's an awful lot of things about Joshua Gray. Whether he goes in the third round, as I think he should, or winds up going to the fourth round as mid or later, as some others suggest, I do think that Joshua Gray is absolutely a starting NFL interior offensive lineman, and one is going to wind up ultimately outplaying where he's selected in the draft.
When we come back, we are going to open up the mailbag. It's been a while. We are going to tackle your questions here. That's coming up next on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV with Wi-Fi 6E and auto low latency mode. Advanced technology. Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gameplay with lightning fast speeds. You need to stay competitive. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube, 3rd Gen. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's been a while since we opened up the mailbag, so let's get to it. We got tons of questions from you, our valued 12s. And this first one is going to be going to Rob here from Matt Gammon on X. How far back can the Seahawks trade before they lose a strong chance at a top interior offensive line candidate? So I'm assuming, Rob, on this question from 18, how far can they trade back to get a top interior offensive line candidate?
Yeah, and thank you, Matt, and thank you for all of our the questions and the support from all of our listeners. I think they can trade completely out of the first round. As I mentioned before with Gray Zabel, there are some questions about Gray Zabel and what position does he fit in best. I think that you see a player like, say, a Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, I think would be another very clean fit. I'll tell you this, if Kelvin Banks from Texas is available to the Seahawks at 18, I think that he is one of those hand-in-glove type of fits just because I really like his agility. I like the tackle guard versatility that he offers. I think that he should be off the board at 18. If he is available, then that suggests to me that the aforementioned Donovan Jackson, quite possibly Tyler Booker from Alabama, and then again, Gray Zabel, I think all of them are available to you. What is the argument that some might have of why you should take an offensive lineman at number 18 overall if you have 4 or 5 or 6 guys that you have basically clumped together? Why not take a player at a different position of more, impact ability or trade back down? To me, that is the biggest argument why I don't think that it is the slam dunk that Seattle is going to be using number 18 overall on a guard, because again, there is a belief that there is a kind of a cluster of players, and it does provide you an opportunity perhaps to trade down. So again, for me, 18 or 25 or even 35. I think that Seattle is going to be looking at their options if they want to prioritize an interior blocker with their first overall selection.
Our next question here coming from David Carter on X, coming from NDSU, did Gray Zabel see enough top-level competition to be a legitimate starter at the pro level? So this is kind of going off some of the stuff that you've said about Gray Zabel. Look, anytime you're talking about an FCS product, you always have to consider the jump in competition. And we have seen plenty of these guys that were dominant at the FCS level come in and just really be over their head and have water up to their eyeballs. But I feel like as of late, we are seeing more of a trend. And I've talked about this quite a bit on our show, Rob, that I do feel like the gap between top FCS programs and FBS programs is closing. And we are seeing more and more of these players not only finding success in the NFL coming from FCS programs, but we're seeing them find early success. And I think when you're talking about a guy like Gray Zabel, who has played a ton of football, he has played a lot of snaps at tackle as well as guard. He's gotten a little action at center. And then he goes to Mobile and arguably was the best offensive player in the entire week in Mobile against top defensive players from the FBS level and Power 4 schools. Look, you always have to take a grain of salt when you're talking about prospects like this, but then you see the athletic metrics. When you turn on the film, North Dakota State kicks out really good players that have had success in the NFL. I think that it may be a player that needs a little time, but because he's played so much and what we saw in the Senior Bowl, I think the tools are there. at least at the guard and center positions. I don't see him playing tackle in the NFL. He's not long enough, and he's got that narrow base. But I think at the guard spot or center, he certainly has the tools, and he's got the experience. I think he'll be able to come in and play pretty early, if not be a day one starter in the NFL. Our next question from Michael W. on Blue Sky. Rob, what are your thoughts on Tyler Booker with this Seahawks offensive scheme? Is he too poor of an athlete? I knew that Rob was going to get a question about this because I've been talking Tyler Booker up on this subject, but everybody wants to know what Rob thinks in this particular instance.
Well, I think that Tyler Booker is a heck of a football player. I don't love his fit in this class. I think that it's basically, going to the deciding you're going to buy a car, buying a Porsche, and deciding that you're going to use it to tow your boat, or buying a big old truck and deciding you're going to try and race somebody off the line. Sure, you can do it. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be that successful in it. I don't think that Tyler Booker is the clean schematic fit in this wide zone offense. All of that said, he's a heck of a football player. I think the Seahawks lack really good interior offensive line blockers. I think they need, frankly, an ass kicker, and Tyler Booker is exactly that. And I don't think it's just in terms of what he brings to the table as far as a football player, but what he brings to the locker room. And ideally, you're not expecting a young player to come in and kind of rattle some cages and be the leader when you have some veterans along Seattle's offensive line here. But I do think that Tyler Booker offers that. So, look, he is not my first pick for the Seahawks as far as number 18 overall, and the fits, I think, in John Benton's system. But at the same time, I do have been looking for the Seahawks to get somebody who is a little bit meaner and nastier and durable and just powerful. And Tyler Booker checks all of those boxes. So if the Seahawks were to make him their top selection, and let's be clear, there's no chance that he is going to be available at number 50 overall, their second selection, then I would be one who's very excited about it, because this would be a return to the physicality that I think made the Seahawks at least once Super Bowl champions.
Jason on Blue Sky, which player is more likely to be extended right now, Riq Woolen or Boye Mafe? Whew, that is a heck of a question, because I think you can look at both these players and have both pros and cons, about 50-50 when it comes to extending him. When it comes to Riq Woolen, when he has been playing at his best, he's been as good as any corner in the NFL. He obviously led all corners and interceptions as a rookie. Last year, when you look at the numbers, his ball production was actually pretty darn good. But the last 2 years, he's given up quite a few touchdowns in coverage. He's been benched briefly both those seasons, and the tackling has been so hit and miss. I don't know that right now that the Seahawks would be willing to go down that road. It depends what the cost is going to be to re-sign him. As for Boye Mafe, he's been rock solid, but has he been good enough to give a deal 15, 16, 17 million dollars a year or more? No, he has not been that good to this point. Could he be this season? That's potentially the case. If you had to ask me right now of these two players, I think the Seahawks would probably be leaning towards extending Boye Mafe first of these two, just because he has been more consistent and he's given you a more all-around game. He's really been a surprise defending the run. He's had a near double-digit sack season. Last year, had 6 sacks. He gets his hands up in passing lanes. He does so many different things. Cost is going to be the big thing, obviously, with both these guys, but it feels like Woolen's just been too hit and miss right now. This could change, though, after this season. Maybe Seattle decides Riq Woolen's the one we want to extend. But if I had to pick one or the other right now, to me, it would be Boye Mafe. Our next question here, Mitch D on X. What would be your surprise level if Seattle took Jalen Milroe in the first round? Rob, I look, he's going to be in the green room. Maybe there's talk about a team drafting him in the first round. And who knows? Seattle likes to throw wrenches in the first 32 picks.
They do. Jalen Milroe, I'm higher on Milroe than a lot of people seem to be. He is I think that you could make an argument for him being the number 4 quarterback in this class. The Seahawks brought him in for a 30 visit. Of course, the Seahawks also just recently signed Drew Lock, brought him back. So I don't know that the Seahawks are going to be taking a quarterback. Maybe they will. Maybe this is all kind of a smokescreen and bring in a young quarterback and allow Drew Lock and Sam Howell to kind of duke it out to be the primary backup behind Sam Darnold. If that's the strategy you're going to take. That Drew Lock and Sam Howell are duking it out to be the primary backup, then is there a quarterback in this draft class who has more upside than Milroe, who needs more time than Milroe, who also could come in on some kind of some specialized plays. Sorry, hard for me to say that. Specialized plays where you're taking advantage of what makes Milroe special. And that, of course, is his feet and his vision as a runner. I mean, there's a reason why I compare this young man to Michael Vick. I mean, he has the arm strength. He has the elite athletic ability to be an absolute superstar. He is just nowhere near ready to come into the NFL and be successful in an offense as complicated as Clint Kubiak. So I would be stunned, but at the same time, I'd be very excited about this young man's upside.
Last question here coming from Carter Scappa on X. What are the chances Tyler Warren falls to 18 if the Colts pass up on him? Well, I don't think he gets to the Colts, but let's say in this scenario that he does. I'll be stunned if he gets past the Chicago Bears at pick 10, if we're being honest here. But let's play hypotheticals here, and let's say that he's still available and the Colts pass up on him. Look, I think there's a couple teams right behind there. I could see Tampa Bay wanting to go after him and putting him with a couple tight ends they've already got. I could see the Miami Dolphins wanting to add him to their receiving arsenal. He also can block really well. They need any help they can get blocking for Tua Tagovailoa. I just think it's going to be very challenging for him to be there at 18. If the Seahawks want Tyler Warren, I think they're going to have to trade up to get him. If that's the player that they are dead set on getting, and that might be the same case with Colston Loveland as well. Both those tight ends could be gone before the Seattle Seahawks are up at 18. But I expect in this case that Warren is going to be gone before the Colts even have a chance to get him. If he does slip past Indianapolis, I find it very hard to believe he's going to drop another 5 picks into the Seahawks' laps. When we come back, we are going to go back to the center position because really the meat of the center position in this draft is on day 3. We're going to be looking at some developmental day 3 prospects and a few of them that may have long-term starter potential in the right system. We'll get to that up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way courtesy of our friends over at Nissan. My mic working, Rob? Sorry. I it looked like it muted. Okay, perfect. I'll make sure I go back in and get this fixed up here. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Nissan. Each week, we're taking a look at our draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart, the guy we believe showcased the strength and power needed to push the Seahawks forward as we look towards next season. This week's Armada clear-cut player of the week is Nick Emanuwari, a generational athlete with a well-rounded skill set who dominated the best competition in college football in the SEC. Emanuwari offers the heavy-duty toughness and confidence that comes with the all-new Nissan Armada. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly why I think Nick Emanuwari can do that here for the Seahawks. It's clear our player of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's all about centers today. The center of attention, the middle of the offensive line, the communicators for that entire group in the trenches. And as we talked about earlier in the show, Rob, this is not a top-heavy center group at all. There might be 1 or 2 centers that go in the first 3 rounds, maybe 3 if one of their players slips into the 3rd round. Not a very top-heavy group. And in terms of depth, at least in my opinion, there's not a lot of depth necessarily at this position either. With that being said, day 3 is the sweet spot. If you're looking to at least add a backup center, there are a few guys we're going to be talking about that in the right situation could absolutely be starters down the line. A couple of these guys maybe early can play for you because they're experienced centers coming into the league. but there's also some wild cards that are coming off injuries as well. I'm curious for your thoughts on where day 3 stands for the Seahawks potentially at center, at a position that I quite frankly have at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of talent and depth.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, Joshua Gray from Oregon State is a player I'm very, very high on. And if he is available on day 3, I think that he is going to qualify as one of the better players available. I'm going to mention another player that began his college career in the Pac-12 at the left tackle position like Gray, and then moved inside to center, and that being Jonah Monheim from Southern Cal. Now he is a player at 6'4", 303 pounds. He certainly has the size, and because of some injury issues, then he has not been able to work out for scouts, and that is a little bit of a red flag. But he did participate at the Senior Bowl, and when you watch him on tape, Corbin, he is one of the quickest guys off the ball, and he actually has at least 1 year at the center position, which is different than we talked about with Gray Zabel and even with Joshua Gray, 2 guys that didn't have a full season at the center position. So with Monheim, at least you have that. So he is a player that, again, his athleticism, the level of competition, the dependability that he has shown over his career with the Trojans, I think that very much checks some boxes for the Seahawks in terms of day 3 guys that have some upside. And I'll kind of go with the exact opposite, a player like Seth McLaughlin from Ohio State. Now, this was a 3-year starter at Alabama and decided that he wanted to transfer to the Ohio State Buckeyes and go for a national title run. I mean, imagine the luxury of going from Alabama to Ohio State because you want to go for a national title run. But he recognized the fact that the Crimson Tide had given up an awful lot of talent, that they were obviously had the coaching change and things of that nature. Goes to Ohio State. He wins the Remington Award as the nation's best center, but tragically in November, he tears his Achilles, and now his draft stock is slipping. Corbin, to me, he is one of those centers that I view as a legitimate NFL starter, and it comes with a little bit of a discount tag on him at this point because he's coming off of the injuries. We talked about the Seahawks, I think, feel relatively good about their center position. I do think that with McLaughlin, you see a guy that has that type of upside to be able to challenge that, but he might need a quote-unquote red shirt year. So to me, he is another one that makes an awful lot of sense. And then finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Drew Kendall. I mean, the fact that his father was Pete Kendall, a first-round selection at the guard position all those years ago by the Seahawks. Drew Kendall is basically a chip off the old block. I mean, he has the size they're looking for. He has experience at center and guard. He has the quickness and the power. He's not an elite prospect, but still, when you're talking about day 3 guys that have some starting upside, I think that Drew Kendall has the physicality coming out of Bill Bryan's run-heavy offense, the physicality, the toughness, the consistency that you're looking for in a very safe, not necessarily spectacular fit, but a safe selection for the Seahawks at that point in the draft.
Yeah, as far as experienced players in day 3 that I think could be starters, I agree with you on McLaughlin. If he didn't have the injury, he's probably being talked about in that first segment. I think he's got that kind of talent. But an Achilles injury always worries me, especially with the fact that there were reports out there that he was complaining about soreness in his other Achilles. You might remember Anthony McCoy back in the day, and I've seen this with other players, that they tear one and then the other one gets injured. That is not an uncommon thing, unfortunately. So I don't know. I've got some health concerns when it comes to McLaughlin. There's some good things on film. There's no question about it. But for me, Jake Majors from Texas, not the most athletic guy when you're looking at combine or relative athletic score. He was solid. He's not like he's a slouch athletically. He's just not a freak athlete. But still, this guy gave up no sacks in 3 of his 4 years as a starter for the Longhorns. And Steve Sarkisian has raved about this kid with his leadership and just how much his leadership presence mattered to this team making back-to-back college football playoffs. He's incredibly tough. And in the run game, I think he's got just enough athletic juice to be able to handle the zone blocking. He can knock guys off the ball a little bit. He's not necessarily great at either type, but he's good at both. And I didn't get by with that at the center position. He's a guy with the experience he brings. I think he's a high floor, maybe not a high ceiling player, but he can play some snaps for you early with all that experience that he had at Texas. And he's just a rock solid player and locker room guy. 2 other players I want to mention real quick. Same school, different positions, but I'm curious to talk about this because I have put on the tape, and those who have listened to the show here recently, I've talked a lot about Addison West because this is a player that I didn't know much about. And I turned on Western Michigan against Ohio State, those same Buckeyes he's talked about with Seth McLaughlin. And we know that Ohio State won the national championship this year. And they've got a couple defensive tackles that are going to go probably in the first 3 or 4 rounds. They are loaded everywhere. That game, Jacob Gideon, who I think is a draftable center as well, Jacob Gideon got hurt early in that game. And Addison West, who was an All-American right guard for Western Michigan, first offensive line All-American they've had in their program's history. They don't have a center, so they move Addison West to center. And I'm telling you, Rob, I've watched every single Ohio State game on film this year. I don't think there was a center that played better against them than Addison West, who was not a center. He was a right guard his entire college career. But he had some really nice blocks on zone blocks against Tyleik Williams and made him look bad at the line of scrimmage, was able to get him turned and open up some big run lanes, gave up no pressures at the center position in that game. And he had a really good pro day testing wise. He's got the change of direction you're looking for. There's some nastiness on his film. Jacob Gideon's not quite as athletic, but when I watched a couple other Western Michigan games, including against Wisconsin, another really good Big Ten program, he was bullying some dudes in there, and he had a really high zone blocking grade. Both these guys have played a ton of snaps. They've played against really good Big Ten schools, being at Western Michigan, so the competition's been checked off. Look, I'm intrigued by both these guys as day 3 guys to take a flyer on. I mean, Addison West, to me, can be a starting guard in the NFL, but I think he could also be a center based on what I saw in that film against Ohio State, which is as impressive as any center I saw this year. That is saying something given who Ohio State had played, including in the playoffs.
Yeah, no question about it. Addison West is an intriguing guy. There definitely were some splashy blocks on that, in the Ohio State tape. Some that really stunned me because, as you mentioned, he was All-American at right guard, never took a snap at the center position for Western Michigan. And then in the game is actually asked to make that transition. And, some of the very first snaps that I watched, there was like, oh my goodness, look at you. And the agility that he showed, the quickness to the second level that he demonstrated, to me, that was very intriguing. I'll mention another player just because we're talking about kind of some day 3 and maybe undrafted free agent sleepers. And this is one of the Seattle zone, had his played at Newport High School. And that's Jackson Slater from Sacramento State. 6'3", 311 pounds. Actually has a very similar kind of a frame as West, as we talked about before, again from Western Michigan. Slater also was a guard, but I think that his best position in the NFL is going to be at center. I don't know that he's got quite enough juice to be able to get drafted. I'm certainly rooting for the Seattle or Bellevue native, I guess. 5.01 in the 40-yard dash with a 1.78 split, a 10-yard split. That is one of the fastest that we saw of any of the interior offensive line. Joshua Gray from Oregon State had the fastest of those times, by the way. But again, he had a strong Senior Bowl performance, and that to me is one of the reasons why he does have an opportunity. Clearly, NFL teams are intrigued enough to invite the Sacramento State kid out to the Mobile in the first place. So again, that is one of the advantages that he has, kind of checking that box when it comes to the level of competition questions that the Western Michigan players that you mentioned, I'm intrigued by. I don't know that either one of them actually gets drafted.
Yeah, we'll see. Look, Jacob Gideon, I would be maybe somewhat surprised, but I'm telling you, Rob, Addison West has been the fastest riser for me because I watched the Wisconsin game. I watched the Ohio State game. The kid gave up 2 pressures this entire season, and he gave up 4 the year before. 6 pressures in 2 full seasons where he was healthy the entire season. I mean, this guy is a really, really good football player, and he's not small. He's 305 pounds. Not like he's a Joey Hunt-built type guy. I mean, he's got some size, and he's kind of nasty. So, look, he is becoming my all-underrated draft crush, so I'm going to keep raving about it. But he can play center. He showed he can do it against Ohio State. So this is not a good center class, but maybe you can find a gem with one of these guys that we just mentioned here on day 3. As always, you can follow me at X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to shift back over to the defensive side of the football. We got to talk some safeties. It's a lot of fun at that position, a lot of depth at that position. It's all about safeties on tomorrow's show. Make sure that you listen in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.